Hello and welcome. My name is Biagio Mazza, Pastoral Associate at St. Sabina Parish in Belton, Missouri, and I'm here to welcome you to another Do You Know series question. Today's Do You Know question is, do you know the key themes of Mark's Gospel? In our 3-year Sunday lectionary cycles, we have the years A, B, and C. Year B, which begins on the first Sunday of Advent, is devoted to, focused on, the Gospel of Mark. So it's good to look and examine the key themes that surface in Mark's Gospel for us to unpack the readings for this lectionary year. Mark traditionally is associated with Peter and Rome. Roughly, the Gospel is written somewhere between 67 and 73. Traditionally, again, associated with the persecution in Rome of the Christians by the Emperor Nero. Whether this is true or not is irrelevant to the message of Mark's Gospel, because from what we know of the Gospel itself, Mark's community is focused on the fact that they are suffering some sort of persecution, rejection, misunderstanding, prejudice based on the reality of their being disciples of Jesus and being faithful disciples of Jesus. So this experience of persecution, misunderstanding, and rejection leads to a kind of a fear and misunderstanding among the community as to what it involves in being a disciple of Jesus. What are the demands of discipleship with regards to Jesus? Mark writes his gospel to address those very fears and those very misunderstanding of what it means to be a disciple. Mark presents Jesus as the suffering servant, the one sent by God to proclaim the kingdom of God on earth and to establish that kingdom by his teaching, his healings, and his exorcisms. These are all indications of forces of evil that Jesus is overcoming in the proclamation of the kingdom of God. However, the forces of evil are not silent. Satan, demons, the Pharisees, the Herodians, even the Sadducees, all seem to conspire against the kingdom of God and the values and the lifestyle that Jesus is preaching and teaching about. And so as a result, we have a community that is consistently being told that discipleship with Jesus and being faithful to the values and lifestyle of Jesus is going to involve suffering. It's going to involve rejection, misunderstanding, and persecution. And so it's very clear in Mark's Gospel, for example, that Jesus is aware of the opposition against him, and 3 times, especially in the heart of the Gospels, in chapters 8 to 10, 3 times Jesus predicts his passion, death, and resurrection. And each time his disciples misunderstand or seem to refuse to accept the fact that this is going to happen to Jesus. And Jesus consistently comes back at them saying, you foolish ones, you really need to understand that following and obeying the rules and the guidelines of the kingdom of God is going to involve suffering and persecution and possibly even death. And so as a result, Jesus predicts to the community that if they're going to be faithful to his values, they're going to suffer. And yet the community seems to really be in a quandary as accepting that and refusing to accept that, or seeing that as the reality of what it means to be a disciple. As a matter of fact, when Jesus himself is arrested and so on, his own disciples depart from him, leave him alone and abandoned. As a matter of fact, on the cross, Jesus cries out, my God, why have you abandoned me? Even feeling abandoned by God and overwhelmed by the opposition. And yet, Jesus, as he commanded to his disciples, he said, you must take up your cross and follow me. And Jesus himself takes up his cross, follows Jesus, Jesus himself takes up his cross and follows God's values, even to the point of death. But But the story doesn't end there. And this is one of the key messages in Mark's gospel, that the story doesn't end there, but God raises Jesus up and holds him up as the example of what good discipleship involves. Good discipleship doesn't involve being overwhelmed by evil, but good discipleship, in and through the suffering and the obedience to God's ways, ultimately leads to resurrection. But that path is always through suffering. Resurrection comes not without any cost. So taking up one's cross and following Jesus is going to demand that we suffer, that we experience pain and rejection and misunderstanding. That is the core of what it means to be a disciple from Mark's gospel. And I know sometimes it sounds like this is a very depressing kind of message, and oftentimes people say, thank God that we have other gospels to comment on Mark's gospel. But Mark is trying to emphasize an aspect of Jesus that often most of us as disciples find hard to accept. That if we're going to be faithful to God's values and to the modeling that Jesus offered us, it's going to cause all sorts of opposition against us, which will involve misunderstanding, rejection, suffering, and even possibly death. So this is the key message of Mark's gospel, especially what it means to be a disciple, and especially what it means to follow Jesus as the suffering servant of God. So I hope this has helped a bit to unpack some of the key themes of Mark's gospel, and I hope you will return again to more Do You Know series questions to unpack more of our gospel stories, especially focused on the gospel of Mark. Thank you very much.